My name is Diane Holloway. I am 33 years old. And on a Tuesday night in November, I sat alone in a hospital hallway in Memphis, Tennessee, barely able to breathe, while a nurse turned her back on me and walked away. The fluorescent lights above me hummed. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and floor cleaner. People walked past, orderlies, visitors, a man in scrubs staring at his phone, and not one of them stopped. I pressed my hand against the wall to keep myself upright. My chest felt like something heavy was sitting on it. Every breath I pulled in was thin and incomplete, like trying to fill a room through a crack in the window. I had driven myself to the ER because I was scared enough to know I shouldn't be alone, and I had been sitting on a plastic chair in that hallway for 40 minutes while everything got slowly worse. I had begged the nurse at the intake desk. I had told her I could not breathe properly. I had told her something felt wrong in a way I could not explain except that it was serious, and I knew it the way you know certain things in your body before your mind can name them. She had looked at me the way certain people look at certain other people, a look that is already decided, and said, "You'll have to wait your turn." And then she turned away. I sat in that hallway alone, thinking no one was coming, thinking that this was how things went sometimes, that you could be in the right place and still not get what you needed. And then the doors at the end of the hallway opened. The doctor, on duty, walked through. He was moving with the quick, purposeful stride of someone mid-shift, chart in hand, eyes already scanning the hallway ahead of him. He stopped when he saw my face. The chart slipped from his hands. It hit the floor and skidded slightly, and he didn't look at it. He was looking at me. His face had gone completely pale. He turned to the nurse standing nearby and said something just above a whisper, for words that I heard clearly even from where I sat. "Do you know who she is?" What happened in that hallway next made my whole body tremble. But before I tell you what actually happened, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you are watching from. Now, let's begin. I have been a respiratory therapist for 9 years. I did work until that night at Mercy General Hospital in Memphis. Not the same hospital where I sat in that hallway. That is important. I had driven 20 minutes across town to St. Catherine's Medical Center specifically because I did not want to be treated at my own hospital. When you work in medicine, you develop complicated feelings about being a patient where your colleagues can see you. You want to be somewhere neutral, somewhere you are just a person and not a professional with a reputation and a badge and a set of expectations attached to your name. I wanted to be anonymous that night. I achieved that completely, more completely than I intended. The trouble had started that morning. A tightness in my chest that I had been aware of since I woke up but had attributed to stress, to a difficult week, to the kind of physical tension that accumulates when you work long shifts in a high-pressure environment and don't sleep well. I had been a respiratory therapist long enough to know the difference between anxiety and a clinical problem. I told myself it was anxiety. By mid-afternoon, the tightness had deepened. By early evening, my breathing had changed in a way I recognized professionally, even as I resisted acknowledging it personally. By 7:30, I was sitting in my car in my driveway knowing, with the clear and uncomfortable certainty that medical training gives you, that I needed to go somewhere. I drove to St. Catherine's. The emergency waiting room was moderately full. A child with a wrapped wrist. An elderly man being attended to by a woman I took to be his daughter. A teenager with a bag of ice on his ankle. Normal Tuesday night emergency room activity. I approached the intake desk and told the nurse on duty, her name Tag Red R. Simmons, that I was having difficulty breathing, that my chest felt compressed, that I was a respiratory therapist and I was not given to overreacting, but that something felt wrong. She looked at my face. She looked down at her intake screen. She asked me to rate my pain on a scale of 1 to 10. I told her the issue wasn't pain, it was respiratory distress. I told her my oxygen saturation felt low. I couldn't measure it without equipment, but the symptoms were consistent. She typed something. Without looking up, she said, "Take a seat. You'll have to wait your turn." I said, "I work in respiratory therapy. I understand, Tria. I'm telling you this feels urgent." She looked up at me then. That look I mentioned. The one that has already decided something about you before you have finished your sentence. "Ma'am," she said, with a patience that was not patience at all. "Everyone in this waiting room has something urgent. Please take a seat." I took a seat. I sat in the plastic chair and breathed carefully and told myself it would be fine, that someone would come, that the system existed for a reason, and the reason would assert itself. 40 minutes passed. The tightness in my chest did not ease. It worsened in that slow, incremental way that is almost more frightening than something sudden, because something sudden at least has a clear moment of beginning. This had no beginning I could point to. It had only a progression that I was tracking with a detached professional part of my brain while the rest of me sat in a plastic chair in a hospital hallway and tried to keep breathing. I went back to the desk once more. I told Nurse Simmons that I had been waiting 40 minutes and that my condition had worsened, that I was a licensed respiratory therapist, and I was telling her as clearly as I could that I needed to be seen. She said, without looking up from her screen, "Someone will be with you shortly." I went back to my chair. I pressed my hand against the wall. I focused on keeping my breath slow and deliberate. I looked at the other people in the hallway and thought, with a clarity that felt almost peaceful, that I was going to have to figure out another way to get someone's attention before this got worse. And I was trying to think of what that way was when the doors at the end of the hallway opened. His name, I learned afterward, was Dr. Paul Garrett. He had been at St. Catherine's for 11 years. He was the attending physician on duty that night, pulled between the ER floor and the hallway intake area, moving with the stretched efficiency of a doctor covering more ground than one person comfortably should. He came through those hallway doors mid-stride, chart in hand, eyes already reading the space ahead of him the way experienced ER physicians read spaces, sorting, assessing, triaging the room before they have consciously decided to do so.
He saw me. He stopped.
The chart slipped. He didn't look at it. Later, he told me that what he saw in my face and my posture and the particular way I was holding myself against that wall activated something in him that 11 years of emergency medicine had built into instinct. He said he knew before he reached me that whatever had been written on the intake form was not adequate. But that wasn't why his face went pale. He crossed the hallway in a few strides and crouched down to my eye level and said, "Tell me what's happening." And I told him, quickly and precisely, the way medical professionals talk to each other, using the right terms because they were the fastest terms. He listened for about 15 seconds. Then he straightened up and turned to Nurse Simmons, who had followed him with a tablet, and he said in a voice that was very quiet but absolutely clear, "Do you know who she is?" Nurse Simmons looked at him, then at me. "She's a walk-in patient. She came in about 40. She is the respiratory therapist who wrote the ventilator protocol that this hospital adopted 2 years ago," Dr. Garrett said. Still quiet, still completely controlled. The one that is currently posted in every ICU room in this building. Her name is Diane Holloway, and she has been sitting in this hallway for 40 minutes telling you she cannot breathe. The silence that followed was the specific silence of a person understanding, all at once, the full dimensions of a mistake. "Get me a pulse oximeter," Dr. Garrett said. "Get me a wheelchair. And page respiratory. Tell them I need someone from their team in exam room 3 in 4 minutes." Everything moved very fast after that. My oxygen saturation, when they measured it, was 81%. A normal resting saturation is 95 to 100. 81 is the number that makes doctors move quickly and speak in short sentences. I was taken to exam room 3 in the wheelchair I had needed 40 minutes earlier. The respiratory team arrived. Dr. Garrett stayed. It was a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot in my lung. Serious, dangerous, the kind of thing that has a very different outcome depending on how quickly it is caught. It was caught. I was treated. I spent 3 days in the hospital and went home. I want to be careful about what I say next, because the easy version of this story is that a nurse was cruel and a doctor was a hero and justice was served neatly in a hospital hallway. And that is not quite the true version. Nurse Simmons made an error in judgment. A serious one, a potentially fatal one. Whether that error was the result of bias or fatigue or an ordinary human failure of attention on a busy Tuesday night, I genuinely do not know. What I know is that she looked at a woman sitting against a wall struggling to breathe and made a calculation that was wrong. I filed a formal incident report from my hospital bed on the second day. Not out of anger. Out of the same professional obligation I would expect from any colleague in any situation where a process had failed in a way that could harm someone. The report was received. An investigation was conducted. I was not involved in the outcome beyond that. What stayed with me, what I have thought about every day since, was not the 40 minutes in the hallway. It was what Dr. Garrett's question revealed. Do you know who she is? It worked. It moved things. It changed the temperature of that hallway in an instant. And it should not have been the thing that worked. The thing that should have worked was a woman sitting against a wall with an oxygen saturation of 81% saying clearly and repeatedly that she could not breathe. That should have been enough. For anyone, regardless of who she was or what she had written or what her name meant inside that building. Dr. Garrett understood that too. He came to see me on my third day, before I was discharged. He sat down and asked how I was feeling, and we talked for a while about the case and about the protocol and about the strangeness of being a medical professional on the patient side of things. Before he left, he said, "For what it's worth, I didn't say what I said because your credentials mattered more than anyone else's. I said it because it was the fastest way to make a correction that needed to happen immediately. I want you to know I would have moved the same way regardless." The oxygen saturation alone told me everything. I believed him. I still do. I have been back at work for 6 weeks now. Mercy General, my own hospital, the one where people know my name and my badge and the protocol on the ICU wall. Some mornings I walk the hallways and I think about what it felt like to be invisible in one, to be a person in distress in a plastic chair while the world moved past. To know with professional certainty that something was wrong and have that certainty mean nothing to the person who could have acted on it. I think about every patient I have ever treated, every person I have assessed in a hallway or a room or an intake area. Every time I have looked at a face and made a decision about what I was seeing and what it meant. I hope I have always looked carefully. I am more certain now than I have ever been that careful looking is the entire job. Not the machines. Not the protocols. Not the credentials on the wall. Just looking at the person in front of you and seeing them completely. That is all it ever was. That is all it needs to be.